Tonight, we check in with the poor man's Greg Gutfeld, George Clooney. Remember, he wrote a scathing op-ed prior to the election calling on Joe Biden to drop out? And this week, he took to CNN, the only place he's seen less than in his own movies, to gloat. God, I hope God, I hope Jake Tapper doesn't plant his lips firmly on George's puckered ass.
George Clooney. The name alone conjures images of silver screen charm, undeniable talent, and a kind of old Hollywood cool that few can replicate. For decades, he's been the man who could seemingly do no wrong, gliding from blockbuster hits to critically acclaimed dramas, always with that knowing smirk and an espresso seemingly at the ready, an icon of Tinseltown.
What's the matter, George? Are the Hollywood roles getting a little hard to come by as you age and get decidedly more smug and self-congratulatory? I'm just asking. And chooses to finish this show by lecturing the audience on how journalism ought to be done. Speaking as Edward R. Murrow, he warns about the ongoing struggle for truth and integrity in the media. Truth and integrity. About the potential for the media to be manipulated and used for propaganda.
But what happens when this king of celluloid decides his kingdom isn't big enough? When he wades into the treacherous currents of American politics with a declaration designed to rock the very foundations of the establishment? He penned an op-ed, a bold call for Joe Biden to step aside, a move many saw as Clooney planting his flag, ready to be hailed as a serious political mind. He likely envisioned a narrative of courage, but the reality that unfolded was far more brutal.
Brave.
It was a civic duty. When I saw people on my side of the street not telling the truth, I thought that was time to...
Are people still mad at you for that?
Some people, sure.
Wow, if that's Clooney with makeup, imagine what he looks like without it, huh?
Appearing on CNN, a network he's apparently seen on less than in his own movies lately, Clooney attempted to frame his controversial op-ed as an act of reluctant heroism. He spoke of being raised to tell the truth, of a profound civic duty compelling him to voice uncomfortable realities about the then-current political leadership. He even invoked the spirit of journalistic icon Edward R. Murrow, warning about the ongoing struggle for truth and integrity in media.
So she and George get together and they start navel gazing on stage about themselves, of course, and their vaunted profession and how bad, how just terrible the media is, and had the following exchange.
What we do in this is we talk about the responsibility of journalists to hold truth to power, right? That's our goal. And so if you're doing that, and we don't tell people what to think, when we show that montage at the end, for instance.
It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, delivered with his signature smoothness and an air of solemn conviction. But as he pontificated from a position of immense wealth and privilege, his words began to sound less like brave truth-telling and more like a lecture from a man profoundly disconnected. The initial public and media reactions were mixed, but a significant undercurrent of skepticism quickly surfaced as people began to question his vantage point from his Lake Como ivory tower. The cracks in his self-appointed prophet persona were beginning to show.
I remember Clooney's the same guy who held a star-studded fundraiser for Joe weeks before he dropped out and only called for him to quit after his disastrous debate. Clooney ignored concerns over Biden's age for years, only to magically come to the conclusion that he was demented when America finally saw what Clooney had been hiding. That's the problem with Dems. They're obedient shills for awful people, then pretend otherwise once voters see that they're full of. But remember, we were pointing out Joe's dementia before it was cool. We knew Biden was the worst president ever, which probably means Jimmy Carter died a happy man.
Then came Greg Gutfeld, a commentator who treats celebrity political pronouncements with all the reverence of a wrecking ball encountering a poorly built shed. When Gutfeld set his sights on Clooney's grand political gesture, the result was less a debate and more a comedic demolition derby. He didn't just criticize Clooney, he lampooned him, famously quipping that Clooney was perhaps the poor man's Greg Gutfeld, a jab that immediately set the tone for the onslaught.
New nuggets are breaking. Tara Palmieri, who's got her own Substack and podcast now, she's been on the show, she got a copy and released a couple of the nuggets, and so did The Guardian. But hers was a really interesting nugget. And she's apparently in this book, they reveal that George Clooney saw Morning Joe one day, right after his op-ed, and Mika Brzezinski was suggesting that Barack Obama was behind the George Clooney op-ed that was basically making Clooney seem like Obama's puppet. Yeah. Here's the Mika.
Gutfeld tore into what he described as Clooney's Malibu Messiah complex, the peculiar affliction where celebrities, accustomed to universal applause, begin to mistake their popularity for profound wisdom. He painted a picture of Clooney as decidedly smug, impossibly self-congratulatory, and hilariously out of touch with the concerns of average Americans, suggesting his understanding of middle America was akin to a Yelp review from someone who's never left Beverly Hills. According to Gutfeld, Clooney's pronouncements weren't just empty, they were high-calorie, low-nutrient versions of political thought, stuffed with expensive-sounding words, but utterly devoid of logic or real-world understanding. His takedown was brutal, hilarious, and it resonated deeply because it articulated a growing public weariness with being lectured by the ultra-rich. Gutfeld's comedic barrage was a masterclass, but these blows were just the opening act.
Party. I bet there's one person in particular he thinks is spectacular.
There's one person in particular I think is spectacular. There are a few who I think is levitating above that is Wes Moore. I like him a lot. I think he could be someone we could all join in behind. We have to find somebody rather soon. It's our job now to put together a proper team to stand up because we're right now polling very poorly.
I love that. Levitating above, as opposed to sinking to the bottom, like his last movie.
If Gutfeld wielded a comedic flamethrower, Megyn Kelly arrived on the scene with a surgeon's scalpel, ready for a meticulous and chillingly precise dissection of Clooney's arguments. She didn't rely on humor, she relied on facts, logic, and an uncanny ability to expose the soft underbelly of celebrity posturing, approaching the situation with the calm demeanor of a seasoned prosecutor. Kelly systematically dismantled Clooney's carefully constructed image as a political savant, starting with what she identified as blatant elite virtue signaling. She pointed to the glaring, almost comical contradictions in his public persona. The passionate advocate for climate action who reportedly traverses the globe in carbon-spewing private jets. The champion of equality who lives in opulent, heavily guarded mansions far removed from the struggles of ordinary people.
Here he is going on, this is to 60 last night, about, you mentioned his op-ed in the New York Times on Joe Biden and why he did it. Such a selfless, brave act, Ben. Here he was.
I was raised to tell the truth. I had seen the president up close for this fundraiser, and I was surprised. And so I feel as if there was a lot of profiles in cowardice in my party through all of that. Oh, wow. And I was not proud of that. And I also believed I had to tell the truth.
That fundraiser where he saw Biden almost falling off the stage, where Obama came out to grab him, was June 15th. The debate was June 27th. It wasn't until July 10th, almost a month after he attended the fundraiser with him, that George Clooney finally wrote that op-ed after it became clear that Joe Biden wasn't stepping down. He's such a liar.
Kelly's core argument was a powerful one. Fame, a recognizable face, and a knack for delivering lines convincingly do not automatically confer wisdom, moral authority, or political expertise. She directly questioned why major news networks were so quick to provide a prominent platform for an actor to opine on complex policy matters, as if starring in a political thriller somehow equated to understanding actual geopolitics. Her scrutiny was sharp and unflinching. Clooney had attempted to portray his op-ed as a moment of profound, almost solitary courage, a difficult but necessary step taken for the good of the nation. But what if the timeline of events painted a drastically different, far less heroic picture? A closer examination of the sequence leading up to his public declaration began to raise some deeply uncomfortable questions about the true nature of his bravery.
But in this new world of common sense, what does he align with? He might have way more in common with Trump than he is with the progressives. The question is, does he have the bravery to say that? I have no idea where he stands on the border, sanctuary cities, or trans extremism. How does he feel about the fires in LA? Is he happy with how it was handled by Mayor What's-Her-Face and Governor who's his name? You know,
First, there was the star-studded high-dollar fundraiser Clooney hosted for Joe Biden. Then came Biden's widely panned, disastrous debate performance, a moment that shifted public and media perception dramatically. It was only after this public relations catastrophe, when the political winds had clearly and decisively shifted, that Clooney's brave op-ed appeared. This timing led many to wonder, was this truly a proactive act of political conscience, or a reactive, calculated move? Was he leading the charge, or merely scrambling to get on the right side of a public opinion wave? The whispers didn't stop there. Speculation even surfaced, reportedly amplified by figures like Mika Brzezinski, suggesting that perhaps Barack Obama himself was the unseen hand guiding Clooney's pen, an attempt to orchestrate a political maneuver. If true, this would cast Clooney less as a fearless pioneer and more as a well-groomed puppet, deepening the questions around his motives.
Julia Roberts, who outed herself not only as a leftist, which we knew, but as somebody who, and by the way, she's also a husband stealer. She stole the husband that she has right now in a reported affair. So, okay, maybe don't be the voice of the ad in which we talk about women betraying their husbands, because in the leftist view, marriages are not about honesty and talking about one's differences and agreeing to disagree on certain dicey issues, but they're about lying. And they believe this so strongly, you put it in an ad. And her pal, George Clooney, who did something similar for another ad, same. You got Joe Biden out. How'd it work out for you? How'd that go? Maybe you should have said something a little early.
The critiques leveled by Gutfeld and Kelly didn't just reverberate within the echo chambers of media circles. They ignited a veritable firestorm of public agreement. Their words struck a chord because they articulated what a vast number of people were already thinking. Suddenly, social media was awash with memes lampooning Clooney, and video clips of the takedowns went viral, spreading like wildfire. There was a palpable sense of relief, almost catharsis in the public response, a feeling that someone had finally dared to say the emperor, or in this case, the Hollywood heartthrob had no clothes. It was as if a collective unspoken frustration had finally found its voice through these sharp critiques, validating a widespread sentiment.
So when he talks about cowardice, he waited a long time, but he should have the guts to maybe say that his friends in Hollywood, like John Voight or Mel Gibson or Sylvester Stallone, who shared a risk, might have been right on a few things. He's starring in Glengarry Glen Ross, am I right?
No, it's Good Night and Good Luck.
Oh,
sorry,
never mind.
my fault.
I was going to say, I mean, they have tremendous respect for David Mamet. David Mamet is one of the most conservative people. So maybe instead of just sitting in silence, you should actually speak up for some of the people who shared the risk in Hollywood.
This explosive reaction wasn't just about George Clooney's specific political miscalculation. It tapped into a much broader and deeper vein of public exhaustion with what many perceive as limousine liberalism, the phenomenon of ultra-wealthy celebrities delivering sanctimonious lectures. Clooney, perhaps unwittingly, became the poster child for this profound disconnect between the elite and the everyday citizen. Is there a point where the constant, uncritical applause from an insulated echo chamber becomes so deafening that it drowns out any voices from the outside world? George Clooney's bruising encounter with political reality might just be the ultimate uncomfortable case study. His world, the glittering realm of Hollywood, often operates on shared narratives and mutual adulation, a stark contrast to the diverse realities faced by the general populace.
I think, there's Johnny come lately, I was raised to be honest, is a bunch of BS. All right. Obama told him to do it. He sees himself as this extremely important person. I think he's an arrogant, condescending, smug individual who thinks that, he should be able to tell people in America and the Democrat Party, certainly, what they should and shouldn't do. This president, Joe Biden, is one of the most disastrous presidents that we've had in America.
In this context, commentators like Greg Gutfeld and Megyn Kelly became powerful conduits for a widespread simmering sentiment that celebrity opinions, especially on intricate political and social matters, often lack genuine grounding and authentic understanding of everyday struggles. They amplified a frustration that had been brewing beneath the surface for some time. The message that resonated so strongly was that true credibility isn't something you pick up with a SAG award or an Oscar statuette. It's earned through relatable experience, genuine connection, and a humble understanding of the world beyond the studio gates and gated communities. It was a stark reminder that applause doesn't equal authority. Did George Clooney's very public drubbing signal a genuine turning point in how we view celebrity political interventions? Or will the allure of the famous face always find a platform? This episode laid bare deep public skepticism. One has to wonder if this whole affair will serve as a lasting, cautionary tale, or if it's just another fleeting moment. It leaves us all to ponder the true weight of celebrity voices in the serious arena of political discourse, long after the headlines fade. It was clear the tide had overwhelmingly turned, but then, in a moment that seemed to come from an entirely different conversation, Tarlov, perhaps searching for any angle, made a comment about Gutfeld's pants. After intense rhetorical combat, the debate veered into sartorial critique. Gutfeld's reaction was utter dismissal, brushing it off like lint, highlighting its ineffectiveness. He then landed his final characterizations of Tarlov's style, comparing her to an NPR podcast, or if C-SPAN and a yoga retreat had a baby, painting her as humorless and hopelessly earnest. The verbal demolition was complete. The dust hadn't even begun to settle before the internet absolutely erupted. The exchange became an instant viral sensation. Gutfeld's supporters were jubilant, hailing him as a comedic genius. Phrases like intellectual tofu immediately became memes, plastered across images and shared thousands of times. On the other side, liberals attempted damage control, praising Tarlov for remaining calm. Think pieces emerged, decrying the lack of civility or framing Tarlov as a martyr of rational debate. This starkly divided reaction underscored the polarizing nature of the encounter. In the end, this was ideological theater. Gutfeld's charismatically aggressive humor versus Tarlov's data-driven approach. Does this scorched earth style signal a new norm, or is it a unique alchemy of personality and platform? And what does its success say about what audiences truly crave? Information or incineration? The battle lines remain drawn, with viewers perhaps waiting for the next detonation.